Dragon Ball Z is one of the greatest shows ever made. A show that gave us legendary moments that are still applauded to this day. One that's generated hundreds of thousands of fans in every country in the world, and one that still has a lingering influence in the media we consume to this very day. From one arc to the next, we were left captivated by its tales, engrossed by its dramatic fights, and enamored with its characters. It cannot be understated just how impactful Dragon Ball Z was to the world. There was just nothing else like it, and to this day, it still remains relevant in many people's hearts. So, when the show reached its eventual conclusion in 1996, it really felt like the end of something special. But it turned out that this wasn't the end after all, as Toei wasn't quite ready to let their series go. And so, they began work on a new series by the name of Dragon Ball GT. After everything that Z had brought us, the expectations set upon GT were extraordinarily high. It had the damn near impossible task of being the successor to the one and only Dragon Ball Z. And so, only a week after the end of Z, GT premiered. With the question on everybody's mind being if it can live up to Dragon Ball Z. Could it capture the same magic we've known for the last several years? No. No, it didn't. Known for being quite possibly the most reviled and loathed anime ever made, many fans openly denounce and reject its existence. Whether it be because of this feeling of Toei rushing to get this series out, or the departure of series creator Akira Toriyama, and leaving behind only a few designs and ideas for Toei to follow, there was a lot of contempt for this series. With people like me going out of their way to make every jab they can at it for the past several years. But after decades of not having seen it, and the release of a new series in Dragon Ball Super, I wanted to go back to it and see if it's as bad as everybody makes it out to be. To see if all these years of criticism were justified, or if we didn't give GT the proper respect it deserved. So, I decided I would sit through all 64 episodes of GT, also the special, to see how it holds up over 27 years later. To find out if Dragon Ball GT is really that bad. The opening act of GT is such a strange one for me for several reasons. For those of you who don't know, GT takes place 5 years after the end of Z, with the world having known peace since the fight against Majin Buu. But that all changes when the holy grail of evil, the Pilaf Gang, makes a wish using a separate set of Black Star Dragon Balls left over from a prior Guardian. Their wish? To return Goku to be just like he was when they first met him, as a child. And with their wish made, the Dragon Balls scatter throughout the universe, needing to be collected again before a year, or the planet they were used on will be destroyed. And so, Goku, Trunks, and Pan set out on an adventure to gather them before it's too late. Going to faraway planets like Planet Emeka, a planet of money grubbers. It's essentially a dystopia of people forced to live in greed or succumb to poverty because this pink man is their overlord. Not to mention, this is the planet where they meet Giru,
The final machination.
There also belongs a strong warrior whose absurdly big ears surprisingly have no point to his design aside from him just looking like a freak. Then there's also the planet of big things, where Pan becomes a bee for a while, and Goku gives a giant a root canal. Not really much to this one, not gonna lie. And then there's... What the fuck is that? There's this planet of people trying to stop a monster capable of creating earthquakes with a wiggle of his whiskers, and thus give one of their own to the monster as its bride. That person would end up being Trunks, who then gets the monster drunk and finds out the monster doesn't actually make the earthquakes and just predicts them, so Goku shoots a Kamehameha directly into a volcano to make it stop, and oh god, this is stupid. But that's when we get to the meat of this arc, and that's with the Para Brothers. They are part of a scheme to revive Lord Lude, a supposedly powerful being that the planet of People Lude worship like a god. And their way of restoring this being? Turning people into dolls and feeding them into an energy tube? I think? Awakened by Master Doll Taki, the crew faces off against their most powerful villain yet in the series. Or so I'm led to believe, but Goku doesn't even bother turning into a Super Saiyan, so I don't know. But behind it all lies an even greater evil. The creator of Lord Lude, now with a vendetta against these Saiyan warriors. And let me tell you, man, this arc is pretty frustrating. There are several reasons, but what I want to look at is the feeling it wants to chase. Attempting to remake that childlike exuberance, the whimsical nature of the original Dragon Ball. The feeling of a fantastic adventure with all sorts of places and people to meet. I mean, that's the whole idea with the name of the game, right? It's the Grand Tour. And I won't lie, there are plenty of times when it actually does feel fun and exciting. But there's one massive thing holding it back from reaching that goal. And that thing is Dragon Ball Z. With Z, the Dragon Ball franchise evolved from being the goofy adventure comedy to an outstanding action drama. All about the battle within one's own self to become better than who you were before. And so, you have a fundamental issue with this arc taking all these steps back, and after all the trials and tribulations we've gone through with the Z Warriors until now, it made it feel like all the growth and development they had gone through was all for nothing and simply thrown away. Goku no longer feels like the person that sacrificed himself to save the planet from Cell, or the person who fought Vegeta holding back his power to not shatter his pride. Now, it'd be generous to call him a joke since we're just given a punchline. Oh wow, Goku hungry again. Haha, funny. Oh, did Goku's stomach just grumble? Comedy, laugh. Then you've got the problem of all these conveniences for the plot that just don't make any sense. Take for example when the crew goes to a mecha and tries to chase after their spaceship that's been taken away. Goku can't use instantaneous movement anymore because... Then there's that time when the crew is fighting those worm things and very much struggling, and the whole time I'm watching this, all I can think is, just turn Super Saiyan already! And just when you have moments you think might actually be working, like with the Para brothers, the bit is dragged out for way too long. And in doing so, we end up seeing a plethora of reused animation in places where it just doesn't work. Like he's not even speaking in this scene, come on! Not to mention, the fights here all feel thrown together and uninteresting. Regic in particular comes to mind since, by that point, it feels like we've been starved of any actual action. And when we finally get to the fight between Goku and Regic, it lasts maybe 3 minutes. And what I think is most frustrating is how entirely unnecessary this entire storyline feels. I hate being that guy trying to find logic in a kid's show, but I've gotta say, the series finds far too many ways to either bypass story points or just take things away from our characters for the sake of plot convenience. Like, why didn't they just get the original Dragon Balls on Earth to solve the problem instead of going out into space to guess where these 7 Dragon Balls are scattered throughout the universe? Hell, if they couldn't do that, why didn't they just use the Namekian Dragon Balls like they do later on in the series? Why are we 16 episodes in and we've only collected 3 Dragon Balls? And to top it off, this chase later on would amount to nothing. It accomplishes nothing. And we, as the viewers, have just wasted our time watching these kids goof around on several different planets for no reason.
And then we've got this godforsaken robot!
However, I did mention there are some bright spots here, and it would be really unfair for me to not bring them up. The first thing I've got to talk about is how much I love this OST.
Hey, cut that shit out!
Some of these tracks are absolutely fantastic and really help add to the emotion the scene is trying to deliver. The first time I felt any emotion, aside from sheer boredom, was in episode 7 when the crew was flying over a planet with the track Immense Beauty playing. The score to almost every Dragon Ball property, including Dr. Slump, was composed by Shunsuke Kikuchi, who I've noted before as having a phenomenal mind for music. But for this series, Kikuchi would not return and left the OST to be composed by Akihiro Tokunaga, who some of you might recognize as being part of the Japanese rock band DOA. These tracks go a long way to elevate what might otherwise be a pretty forgettable scene to one that sticks with you for how much any given track would flood a scene with emotion. As for the arc itself, it felt like the longer it went on, the more it would find its footing. At first, it felt pretty aimless with a story structure like, well, this happened, so now we gotta do that. But then you started getting these hints of mystery that caught your attention and made you ask what the next episode was building up to. The Lord Lute saga in particular is an excellent example of this. And this is definitely a side note, but it always hits my ear funny when they refer to this guy as the God of Destruction. Like, please, get your Moscow-looking ass out of here. First, you think it's just the Para brothers. Then there's this guy whose name is, hilariously, Cardinal Muchi. But then it turns out that they were all actually pawns in the scheme of this insanely creepy dude called Master Daltaki, who is outrageously offensive to the eyes and worries me every second of his screen time with Dalpan. And just when you think you've got it all figured out, it turns out that Daltaki is actually an underling of an evil scientist who also created Lord Lude, named Dr. Mew. It might be a bit much, but hey, in comparison to what we've been getting before, I'll take it. That said, I don't suggest taking the plunge into this arc. It's hardly worth anybody's time, and despite being the main course, it manages to feel like 16 episodes of straight filler. And this sentiment was shared not only by fans, but also Toei, who saw the writing on the wall early on. But we'll get to that later. The part that really gets me is that Funimation saw the reception it was getting in Japan, and in GT's initial premiere in the West, decided to skip all of this and start with the next arc to not immediately lose everybody's attention, only being released much later on in the home release for the show. So, while the Black Star Dragon Ball arc was a major disappointment for many fans, it would lead to something much greater. The Baby arc is, without a doubt, the best arc in Dragon Ball GT. Following the events of Lord Lude, Dr. Mew sets out to collect the Saiyans for his own experiments, and so sends the biggest, beefiest Para brother after them. Wait, I'm sorry, his name is what? You see, Dr. Mew has an evil scheme of complete universal domination with the aid of his machine mutants, Lude and Rildo being among them. With them, he plans to gather the Black Star Dragon Balls and create the ultimate machine mutant to help him achieve that goal. So how does he know about the Black Star Dragon Balls? Around the same time, the crew flies past Giru's home planet, who starts acting funnier than usual, and decides he wants to return there, only for Giru to set them up and have them captured by General Rildo. The twist is that Giru is actually a machine mutant who is now back under the control of his maker, Dr. Mew. And to my dismay, sadly, no, they do not blow him up. But the short of it is that Goku, Pan, and Trunks are actually defeated and captured by Rildo and sent off to Dr. Mew for experimentation. Only Giru was faking it the whole time and set up a plan with Trunks before they even got to the planet to trick Mew and Party into believing he was on their side. So Trunks would get captured on purpose while Giru kept on Rildo's good side and became a literal war hero, only to get the device that can release Trunks and Co from their prison that somehow didn't manage to get a cease and desist by Lucasfilm. All to release Goku and Pan at Dr. Mew's base of operations so they can uncover an even bigger conspiracy that Giru and Trunks know about because... and stop him before his evil scheme can play out. Yeah, this part's really stupid. But it does force Dr. Mew into revealing his hand. An evil creation. One that Dr. Mew sees as the evolution of his machine mutants and his key to universal control. This mysterious being gives off a negative energy that, if allowed to materialize, could mean the end of existence as we know it. Wait, hold on a second, this sounds familiar. An evil mustachioed scientist who makes crazy powerful cyborgs and has a secret experiment in a vat that develops into a more powerful being. Oh dear God, we're rehashing Dr. Garo and Cell, aren't we? In any case, this new being still presents the biggest threat to the universe it has ever seen. And if allowed to be released, would wreak havoc on all of existence on a scale unimaginable to any... Oh. He's dead. Nah, I'm kidding. It wouldn't be GT if there wasn't another convoluted twist. Turns out that baby is still alive, erupting out of Dr. Mew, revealing he is the mastermind behind all of this. With Dr. Mew being nothing more than his puppet used to revive himself. So this whole progression is all sorts of whack, but I digress. Jokes aside, I think the idea of Baby is a really good one. We eventually discover that Baby is more than a machine mutant. In reality, his story began long ago. Baby's true heritage is that of a Tuffle, a race of people renowned for their abilities in science. It was a peaceful planet until the arrival of the Saiyans, the powerful warrior race that would dominate the Tuffles and force their hand into creating something abominable. they would use their last remaining scientific resources to create a parasitic-like creature imbued with the genes of the King Tuffle. The creature would then be sent off into space with a mission to take revenge on the Saiyans who killed their kind and restore the Tuffles by converting the rest of the universe into their people. Kind of an oddly evil scheme for a group of supposedly peaceful people, but hey, who am I to judge? I've pointed this out before, but one of the main things that GT has going on for it is that it builds narrative from these characters' pasts. There are actual consequences to everybody's actions, and that's a lot more than I can say about something like Super. And Baby is practically the manifestation of the Saiyan's prior sins, using Saiyan bodies to exact his revenge and conquer the universe. Quite poetic, actually. Not to mention, I think it's pretty difficult to top Boo's human extinction attack in terms of the feeling of despair, but the subjugation of everyone on Earth might actually take the cake. Taking control of Goten to get to Gohan. Oh hey, it's Piccolo. Oh no, he's dead! After all these years! Until he makes his way to Vegeta, using him as his vessel to defeat Goku. And overall, there's something decently compelling about Baby. His cowardly mannerisms, arrogant demeanor, and constant need to prove himself with his borrowed power are all some of his defining traits. He's definitely got a personality that stands out well beyond anything we've seen in GT before, and, in my opinion, beyond anything we see afterward. And not only that, but he actually feels like the first real threat we come across. When Goku, Pan, and Trunks all return to Earth, they get absolutely demolished by Baby and his subjugates. And I have to say, it's quite refreshing, considering it had purely been Goku time for the past 30 plus episodes, which, in case you didn't know, is about half of the entire series. And I'm not gonna lie, it was around this point that I think I found myself finally getting invested. Finally seeing a direction I wanted to go in. Finally being able to click the play next episode button without it feeling like I finally thought I had something to latch onto here. But in typical GT fashion, it just can't seem to help itself. After this dramatic fight with Goku being unable to defeat his own family, and finding out that even Super Saiyan 3 stood no chance against this supercharged Baby, who is in control of the rival that he has literally gone through hell and back with, we then get to the following episode where I guess Toei thought it would be funny to have Goku play a intergalactic game of Mario Party. I wish I was kidding. It's not particularly amusing. It's not what I'd call charming. It feels like it just sucks up all the tension that the arc had done a solid job of building up until that point, and is pretty frustrating. After such a long wait, it finally felt like this ride might actually be going somewhere. It's finally moving. Only for Toei to pull the brakes beneath us, look us in the eye, and without so much as a care, Toei looks at you and whispers, "No." And speaking of frustration, Baby would then take the Dragon Balls that had just been collected in the last arc, you know, the one that we spent several hours of our short lives watching, hoping for things to become better, and then wishes for a new planet Tuffle, making the Dragon Balls once again spread across the universe, and no. So, you mean to tell me that was all a waste of time? Oh dear God. I get that this moment was supposed to be frustrating, but I don't think it came off as frustrating the way they wanted it to. Instead of being angry at Baby, it made me angry that I didn't just turn the TV off. Baby's plan with this wish is to move everyone from Earth onto the new planet Tuffle. And this little span of time is when something caught my attention. In moving everyone over, some gags made me question what being under Baby's control meant, because people like Krillin were still acting like Krillin. Android 18 and Marin were still acting like Android 18 and Marin. These minor things kept building up that made me question, okay, what's the point of this? Luckily, the characters that matter in this arc still have that tinge of evil that led to some good moments. Seeing Gohan and Videl ready to kill Pan was a really upsetting scene that was crafted pretty damn well. That said, going back to the negatives because this is GT, one of the more major things that made me ask that question from before is whatever the hell they did with Oob here. I hadn't mentioned it before, but at the very start of the series, they made Oob out to seem like a pretty big deal. Having trained regularly with Goku to the point where he was seemingly at his level, and maybe even ready to take on the role of the next protector of Earth. But then, they decide to make him get stomped by Baby, only to fuse with Majin Buu, and then get stomped again. Which sucks for a lot of reasons. Firstly, Oob deserves better than that, man. This is practically the one and only time he gets to shine in this series, and he doesn't even last the episode. Secondly, GT actually did a decent job with Boo and had me caring about him more than I had Oob at that point. His farewell to Mr. Satan actually being a pretty touching scene. So, to see all that amount to almost nothing just kinda sucks. I don't want to make a habit of being, oh, I'm Mr. YouTuber. I bet I can write a better story than people who do it for a living. But considering the kind of character that Baby is, wouldn't it have made more sense for Baby to be on the verge of defeat, only for him to pull some cheap trick out of his ass to defeat this new Oob, instead of damn near completely overpowering him both times? I don't know, maybe that's just me. But I can say that things finally start going uphill after this point. I don't know whose idea the Golden Ozaru was, but my god, that is such a fantastic idea. The concept of taking this destructive, remorseless beast and mixing it with the power of a Super Saiyan? How did that idea not come up sooner? It also seems poetic to pull out the same trick used to defeat the Tuffles all that time ago. But now, with a power that can rival, if not surpass, Baby Vegeta. The only problem is that Goku can't control this power and needs somebody to bring him to his senses to reveal an even greater power. And that person is none other than Pan. I'm not gonna lie, right? Starting up GT again for the first time in a long time, my expectations were low, and I did not think I would find much to like about this series. But for all intents and purposes, this scene of Pan trying her hardest to bring her grandpa back to his senses, pleading with him to remember who she is and all the memories they've made together, is actually one of the most touching things I can remember in Dragon Ball, period. With all of these attempts met with senseless anger. That is, until something flies out of Pan's backpack. Something that stops Goku's frenzy and catches his attention. It's a picture showing a time when he and Pan went out to the beach with the rest of his family. Goku begins to reminisce on this memory, looking out to the distant Earth, crying as he comes to his senses. And as he does, something begins to change. He begins a metamorphosis that creates a new form whose power surpasses even the mighty Golden Ozaru. And out of the storm emerges a new Goku. One unrecognizable from any form we had seen before. One that had become a Super Saiyan 4. Now, here's one thing I want to talk about real quick. Over time with Dragon Ball, one of the main things I feel had become an Achilles heel of the franchise is its over-reliance on transformations. It started well with the original Super Saiyan, which changed not only the trajectory for Dragon Ball, but arguably all of anime. Super Saiyan 2 felt like it was meant to be presented as what it was to break the limit of your limit. To give us something that felt unparalleled in power and further cement the direction of Dragon Ball. These transformations have fantastic scenes, narratives, and characters behind them to make them feel impactful and important. But when it comes to some of the other transformations in the series, maybe not so much. As much as people love the design, Super Saiyan 3 is one of my least favorite transformations. It didn't have an emotional swell like the others, it doesn't feel very impactful to the story, and ultimately, it just accomplishes nothing except for maybe putting some more figures up on store shelves and giving Raging Blast 2 some extra marketing points. The point is that I really didn't know how I felt about stacking another transformation on top of 3 when it already had so little going on for it. But this is where I'm shocked to say that GT really delivers. Not only does it have an absolutely incredible design that feels like the ultimate evolution of the Saiyan race, a design made by the incredible Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, known for being the animation supervisor for some of the best moments in Dragon Ball history, by the way, but it also feels like a momentous leap for the direction of GT. Sure, it's a little weird that Goku is an adult again while in this form, but I'm not gonna complain about that. After getting absolutely squashed by this new form, Baby decides to play his final card and become a Golden Ozaru himself. This leading to probably the best fight in the series. Some decent choreography, some good drama, and viable stakes. Even if some of the sequences with Ozaru Baby look kinda goofy. Speaking of goofy, there's also that double knockout scene which feels awkward. I don't know what we're doing putting filler in a show with no manga behind it, but, you know, GT. And then there's this one moment that confuses me when Baby decides to play things dirty and launches a devastating Super Gallic gun at the Earth. One that surely must be capable of destroying the Earth dozens of times over. Right? Well, he just has a bit of a Frieza moment and completely botches what he should be able to do thousands of times over. It could just be that Baby wanted to toy with Goku, I guess? His attitude makes me think it was on purpose, but I can't be sure. But this next one will for sure destroy the Earth. Maybe. But ultimately, Baby gets his tail cut off, escapes from Vegeta's body, and after running off, is shot into the sun and is finally defeated, putting an end to the tyranny of Baby once and for all. In the arc's final episode, everybody from Earth evacuates to planet Tuffle thanks to Baby and his wish, dooming the planet. Well, it turns out Piccolo isn't dead, and they bring him back just to die again. The idea is that if he's gone, the Black Star Dragon Balls are gone and can no longer be used. I'm not here for it, but whatever. The final moment between Gohan and Piccolo here, though, is pretty powerful and yet another moment I can say actually felt emotional. Piccolo deserves a far better send-off than whatever the hell this is. So, if you're going to give me a Piccolo send-off, I'm glad his last moments are spent reminiscing with Gohan. So that helps make up for it a good bit. Although, the fact that they bring back the Earth not even a minute of screen time afterward only feels slightly incredibly insulting. I don't know what Toei's vendetta against Piccolo is, man, but Christ alive. So I was in the middle of editing this video when I noticed something that caught my attention just a wee bit. That really just kind of piqued my interest, you know? I was going through this, just scrubbing through this footage of Piccolo here, you know, in his death scene, you know, only his most important scene, arguably. And I'm just scrubbing. Hey, look at that! Look at that! We got I don't know if I've seen stray frames in animation before, but hey, buddy, there it is. You know, just we couldn't be to care about Piccolo and his death scene in Dragon Ball GT. This is what we get. We get and so Goku and Co have a wish now they want to use the Namekian Dragon Balls. Have a wish granted to bring back the Earth and have everything back to the way it was. Part of what's so interesting about the baby arc is how you can feel that it was a panic response from Toei. How you can feel their need to course correct GT back onto the track of Z. According to Kozo Morishita, a producer for almost every piece of Dragon Ball content, he revealed that they initially had about 26 episodes worth of rough outlines for the plot written out for GT. And that was all for the Black Star Dragon Ball arc. However, by the time they finished the final script for the third episode, they realized, and I quote, "These travel episodes aren't going to be interesting no matter how long we keep doing them, are they?" A feeling that would be eventually echoed by fans who just watched the high-stakes excitement of Z and then wandered into the meandering story of GT. And so, a shift to make it feel more like Z was put into place. And that gave us the baby arc. But that sudden change in this show's direction can really be felt in the writing and narrative. For example, Baby is a weird character because of the universal toughization thing. Like, the revenge against the Saiyans part? I get it. The Saiyans did destroy their home planet, so that one makes plenty of sense. But in having Baby, the last hope of the Tuffle race, be a supervillain with plans for universal domination, it almost makes me feel like Toei is trying to tell me that the Saiyans were justified in conquering their planet, which I highly doubt was their intention. Maybe the idea was that if these people were so peaceful, they'd control everybody to make the universe peaceful? If that's the case, then that was never properly communicated. Here's me putting my YouTuber's writer hat on again, but I can't help but think it would have been so nice to see Baby be a lot more of a gray area character. One that fights so blindly for his long-lost people to the point where he doesn't even realize that the Saiyans he fights against are not his enemies. There's this moment in the battle between Goku and Baby when Bulma, under Baby's control, pleads with him to protect their new home world against Goku so that it may not suffer the same violent fate as they had once gone through before. And I just thought how meaningful this moment could have been if Toei played their cards right and had the time to craft this character. Just imagine, right? Baby would be fighting for the right reason, but doing it the wrong way. It'd be a lot more compelling. Funny enough, I feel like they would successfully tackle this concept several years down the line with Granola in Dragon Ball Super. Aside from that, it also struck me as strange that after being completely overpowered by Super Saiyan 4 Goku, Baby never attempted to take over Goku's body. In my mind, that feels like the next logical step, right? He is a crafty villain whose cowardice leads him to borrow power that isn't his to achieve his goals. So I feel like instead of beating him the way they did, wouldn't it have made more sense to try and have him take over Goku's body and be defeated in that attempt? Add to the fact that GT has this annoying quality of cutting away from the action and just telling us what happened. I remember feeling physically embarrassed as Goku and Baby were going to fight, only for it to cut to the Kai saying that Goku has been caught. Like, we really just couldn't have been shown that. Overall, these are pretty minor things in the context of a kids show, but considering how some recent kids properties with some higher themes and concepts have been received, and even the series that came before it, I just can't help but feel like I wanted more out of this arc, and I just didn't get it. But that isn't to say that there aren't moments I like a lot here. Some I even hold as some of my favorite moments in Dragon Ball overall. So I felt like I could look past all of that because after the frustration of the first arc, this one felt like it finally got a sense of direction and might actually be the first right step towards the betterment of this series. So, with that being said, the next arc in GT surely has to be a great one. Alright, what's next? Ah, fuck. The Super Android 17 arc is the worst thing in all of GT, and maybe the worst thing to come out of Dragon Ball, period. I can't remember the last time I watched something that felt so clumsy, so frustrating, and so soulless. I recently made a poll on my channel asking people what they thought was the best arc in GT. Unsurprisingly, the Baby arc won with a definitive 69%. What surprised me was that 8% of you poor souls chose the Super 17 arc as your favorite. And for that, I am horribly, horribly sorry for what's about to come next. You may want to cover your ears because the positives I have for this arc are few and far between. This arc is so lucky that the first episode is a Budokai Tenkaichi one because there's actually some charm to this episode. As a matter of fact, I'd argue that this episode does an infinitely better job hitting me with the fun, lighthearted spirit of Dragon Ball than the Black Star Dragon Ball arc ever did. Pan dominates the tournament until she realizes the winner becomes Mr. Satan's replacement, and gives up is a funny bit. Oops, senselessly beating up the old geezer got a good chuckle out of me, and having Goku fight in the Kids League just for Vegeta to bust in and demand a fight with the child in front of a live audience was priceless. Not to mention, the end of this episode is home to probably the only not extremely annoying Goku hungry bit in GT. Aside from the Kid Goku thing, I could see this episode being a nice little special in the same vein as Yo Son Goku. And I actually really appreciated it after the gloomy attitude the last few episodes had given us. That said, it's all downhill from here. So far downhill. This arc revisits the villain of Dr. Mew, who is in hell after his death at the hands of Baby. A villain frustrated with his downfall at the hands of the Saiyans, harboring a bitter hatred for them, especially Goku. Well, there's another villain in hell with a similar vendetta against the boy, one we haven't seen for quite some time. Or one we've seen pretty recently if you consider Dr. Mew's design to be a ripoff. Out from the shadows emerges another mad scientist, hell-bent on his revenge. The one and only Dr. Gero. So together, they hatch up well, I'm gonna put the word brilliant here in quotation marks, a brilliant plan to escape from the maw of hell and end their Goku problem once and for all. And what exactly is their plan, you might be asking? Well, together, they make a new Android 17 and manage to take control of the old Android 17. And hold on, wait a minute. So let me get this straight. So Dr. Gero, who was unable to control either Android 17 or 18, and Dr. Mew, who was unable to control Baby, are somehow able to make it so this new Android 17 and the old Android 17 are just cool with taking orders? Wait, they're in hell. How do they control the Android 17 on Earth? Did they just airdrop evil into the old one, or what's going on? I guess 2 incompetent scientists are better than 1? And then the 2 Android 17s syncing their power up can open a rift from hell to Earth? I'm just not even gonna question it, I'm just gonna let it happen. And with that rift open, a swarm of villains from the past make their way to wreak havoc on the Earth. Hell, Cooler's even there for a second, so I guess that's neat. Goku flies into the portal to Hell to face off against them, only to get trapped there as Doctors Gero and Mew look to unite the androids. And then, when things couldn't get any worse, we get the return of 2 of the most malicious villains Goku has ever faced. Frieza and Cell, with newly found power, emerge from the shadows to exact their revenge. It's a pretty neat cliffhanger. Until you realize what comes next. Okay, so originally there was gonna be a whole segment here dedicated to bashing the hell out of episode 43. An episode I said was the absolute worst thing in the series. But after looking more into it, there's a lot more going on here than I first thought. The main problem was that I, like many others, thought the animation in many spots here looked pretty ugly, with Cell especially taking the brunt of the wonky designs for this episode. It turns out that the studio that worked on the animation for this episode, Studio Doga Kobo, were not super familiar with the design aspects of Dragon Ball. This was especially true with the animation supervisor, Noboru Koizumi, whose role is essentially to direct the animation for a given project. And ultimately, it's typically the animation supervisor's style that shines the brightest. And his style at the time was pretty unique, with some defining characteristics being the angularity he would bring to his designs and the dynamic expressions his characters would make, which shows in pretty much every design in this episode. And his animation style, it's good. It's really good. And you can see that in his work with One Piece that really just oozes this personality that a lot of other anime struggle to find. So the real problem here isn't that the animation and designs here are bad, as much as the animation and designs here aren't Dragon Ball. As a matter of fact, there are some really stunning looking shots in this episode. They're just in between those really weird shots of Cell. Forgotten Relics actually has some really great videos talking about the animation of this series, and I'd highly recommend checking them out if you're at all interested in learning more about the animation side of it, as he covers it a lot better than I ever could. So while that explains that aspect of the episode, everything else going on here is not so easily salvaged. For example, I think it just kinda sucks that we had to have an episode dedicated to making a joke out of Cell and Frieza. And are you really going to sit here and tell me Goku can defeat both Cell and Frieza simultaneously without so much as busting a sweat? But for some reason, Vegeta can't just immediately destroy Android 17. You want to show off how insanely powerful Goku has become since facing these 2. Yeah, cool, I get it. But treating 2 of the most influential villains of the franchise like copy paper just gives off this vibe that says these guys are just meaningless now, aside from being a nostalgia hit. For Christ's sakes, these 2 are some of the biggest reasons people invested in the franchise in the first place. Would it kill you to put a little bit of respect to their names? All I think they accomplished in this episode was accidentally awakening a new kind of fetish here. Then the rest of the episode is just an unfunny joke where Goku gets dropped to deeper and deeper layers of hell. Seriously, I don't know who they were expecting to get a kick out of this. The episode, thankfully, ends with the original Android 17 confronting Android 18 while she's with Krillin and Marin. leaving another pretty big cliffhanger for the next episode, which is not much better. If you think what Toei did to Piccolo was bad,
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
Until now, Krillin has been nothing but the butt of the joke in every scene he has been in. And in the first moment when he finally has something serious going on, where he's protecting his wife and daughter from Android 17, he's just killed off. For somebody who is so integral to the story of Dragon Ball, scenes like this are honestly just disheartening. I understand why you want to make Goku the story's central focus, but that doesn't mean that all these characters we've come to know and love over the years should just become cannon fodder for the narrative to progress. That said, Android 18 is the one star that shines here among the pile of doo-doo feces. She's always had this stern, apathetic nature to her, not giving a single solitary hoot to anything or anyone. So when Krillin is killed before her eyes and she explodes in a burst of rage, that actually felt impactful. This is also the episode where we finally get Super Android 17, whose design, I've got to say, is pretty sleek. It's just too bad they only gave him one animation cycle. No, seriously, I'm going to complain about this. Why does he push his hair out of the way in almost every single shot he's in? I'm gonna make you go through the same pain that I did watching him push his stupid hair out of the goddamn way. Goku then gets out of hell with the help of Piccolo, and I'm honestly surprised they didn't try killing him again here, to take on this newly formed android. Also, Dr. Mew double-crosses Dr. Garo and gets him killed by Super 17. Poetic, I know. Here's one thing I want to point out that was interesting, and that's what they decided to do with Vegeta here. You see, Vegeta is getting his sorry ass handed to him and, in an outcry, says, "I am an Earthling who carries the pride of a Saiyan," which really caught my attention. I've said it before and I'll say it again, but Vegeta is my favorite character in all of Dragon Ball. I've always felt his character arcs are the most interesting, with maybe the exception of Gohan in the Cell arc. And what's being done here is that they've made Vegeta fully transition to his new home. This is the only time I can think of where he calls himself an Earthling. And, you know, that's a good place to take his character. Embracing the planet that he initially looked at as the source of his weakness, as now the biggest source of his strength. This while also keeping pride in his original heritage. While I do prefer where his character goes in Super, credit where credit's due. Seeing this side of Vegeta is different and actually piqued my curiosity. Although, that interest wouldn't do much to keep him from being one shot away from seeing God, but of course, Goku steps in at the last moment to save him and begins his fight with 17. And, oh buddy, this is one lame fight. Okay, because I have to start with the nice stuff, the beginning of episode 46 is solid. There are some really nice looking shots here that beautifully visualize the tension in the air, helping it have that big fight feel. I especially love those deep red backdrops that highlight the great background scenery. Alright, that's the positives out of the way. Let's talk about the bad. I know Goku is a dunce, right? But where he excels is battle IQ. I should know. I've seen those Who Would Win videos and he always wins that part. So I'm amazed that I'm supposed to buy the fact that it took Goku forever to find out that Super 17 feeds off of Ki when Super 17 is taking no damage and then begins to laugh maniacally every time he shoots a Ki blast at him. Then when 17 starts hiding, Goku says that 17's Ki will reveal him. Like, "Excuse me, sir, since when have you been able to sense Android Ki? Also, why is Goku's test to make sure Super 17 is absorbing his energy to use his most powerful move against him and see if he'll take it? Hold on, let me supercharge this villain real quick, what could go wrong?" Then the rest of this fight just sucks. Turns out giving the enemy a major advantage didn't work out super well for Goku, and he gets beaten up. So cut my life into pieces, his last resort is to blow himself up with Super 17 to beat him. And this becomes pointless because Super 17 isn't defeated, and Goku doesn't blow himself up. They really tried pulling a final atonement without any of the emotion or the drama, so it just kind of landed with the impact of a wet fart, which at this point might as well be the tagline for GT. Oh, thank God, it's Android 18. Maybe something interesting will finally happen. Well, damn, okay. Alright, jokes aside, her idea is to bluff the bomb in her chest to scare Super 17, which, I gotta say, is a little confusing. Like, Android 16 to Cell? It was stretching it at that point, but I was willing to believe it. But the jump from Cell to Super 17 is massive. Gotta tell you, 18, I'm not sure that's a very viable bluff. But this stresses 17 the hell out so hard, he ends up killing Dr. Mew instead. And then the next thing you know, regular-ass Kid Goku fists a new hole in Super 17, and he's defeated. They ultimately decided that 17 knew that 18's bomb was just a bluff, and some remaining good in him stopped him from attacking 18. I guess it's a nice way to end this nightmare, but it's still a nightmare nonetheless. I want you to keep in mind that the entirety of this arc, including the Budokai Tenkaichi arc, was only 7 episodes long, and it felt like absolute hell. Episodes dragged, things didn't make sense, and important characters and moments of the past felt spat on by their references here. Frieza? Lame. Cell? Loser. Final Atonement? Who wants to commit to that? The narrative progression also seems weird here. You'd think that with Krillin being killed, they'd set it up so that Android 18 shows up after Goku has given it his all, only to tell him that 17's killed Krillin, his best friend. And then Goku, in a fit of rage, hits him with an Omega Kamehameha or something like that. This arc grabs so much from the past, so why not that part? Nah, instead, when Goku actually does learn that Krillin has been killed, he couldn't be to care. He just hits 18 back with an, ah well. If I'm being honest here, to me, this arc reeks of a team that has given up. After failing with the original plan for the show and changing its direction, both with no avail, I think Toei saw the writing on the wall and sloppily put this together just to set up for the final arc and put this show out of its misery. And that final arc would be... I think the Shadow Dragon arc is a really fascinating one. The setup for this arc is that the Dragon Balls have been gathered to undo the damage from the last arc. Only something strange seems to be happening to them. As they've been collected, the crew notices some strange cracks on the Dragon Balls. And when gathered together, release a malicious smoke, and instead of releasing Shenron, release... Yo, wait a second. Does that dragon have a cigar? That's actually sick. Out comes Smoke Shenron, with a great theme to boot, telling everybody there that after years of abuse by the Earthlings, he will no longer be their pawn, and breaks free as he splits up into 7 deadly dragons. Elder Kai explains that because the Dragon Balls disrupt the natural course, they store negative energy within them, splitting up every time after use with the idea to let that negative energy dissipate for roughly 100 years. However, thanks to their massive overuse, this negative energy has been allowed to boil over and materialize into the Shadow Dragons, beings powerful enough to take over the universe should they be left unchecked. And so, Goku sets out to beat these Shadow Dragons, feeling he is at fault for having used the Dragon Balls so much. Now, evil dragons that spawn from specific wishes made on the Dragon Balls? I absolutely love that idea. I'd go as far to say that I think it's the best idea the series has had up to this point, and arguably one of the best ideas the franchise has had as a whole. Seeing that there are consequences for our heroes' actions, and damning their overuse of the Dragon Balls as a get out of hell free card feels very refreshing. And here, we don't have that insurance anymore. They can't guarantee their safety net and need to fight the very sins of their past. I don't know if it's because the last arc was so dismal, but these next few episodes where Goku, Pan, and Giru are searching these dragons out are decently fun. As a matter of fact, I'd say that this achieved the feeling that the original arc of GT was trying to go for. It had that adventure feel, the episodes didn't feel like a massive waste of time, and the OG Dragon Ball charm was starting to resonate a bit. And I think their ideas for these dragons made sense and were an interesting way to present them. For the most part. The idea is that the Shadow Dragons are all unnatural beings that feed off from the power of the Earth, hence their elemental qualities. And in nearly every fight, the forces of Earth help out against them. Now, the execution was on par with about everything else GT does, but A+ for the idea. Also, just because Lord knows I'm not going to be able to pronounce their names in the Japanese dub without being made fun of in the comment section, I'll be referring to the Shadow Dragons by their English dub names. So let's get the trash mobs out of the way. The first dragon up is Haze Shenron, who is a complete joke and all in all is kind of fun. After all the build-up for these guys seeming like unstoppable threats, having the first one be a jobber and get tossed around by Pan is a pretty solid gag. Rage Shenron kinda sucked, mainly because he wasn't even beaten, he just lost because he's a dunce, and the episode with him felt like it dragged on for a while. If anything though, Dragon Thunder is a pretty cool attack name. Oceanus Shenron is notable for two things. One, being born from the Panty Wish by Oolong, and two, giving me an episode where this is happening. I gotta tell you, Goku transforming into a Beyblade was not on my list of things I was expecting to happen here. How do you say that name? Chi Shinron is the dragon that really just hit Goku and Pan with the
I don't really feel like it.
before taking over Pan's body and then losing that said body because of his hubris. I like his segment in particular a decent bit. That said, these episodes haven't been anything special up to this point. They've very much been villain of the week type material to be introduced and concluded within an episode or two. But now we get to the bosses of the arc. Starting off with the most interesting of the bunch, Nova Shenron. This is because of how different he acts compared to the other Shadow Dragons. For example, he decides to spare Pan after one-shotting her when he very easily could have killed her there. He chooses to indulge Goku on this Scooby-Doo-ass chase around the town, instead of very easily being able to flash fry him on several different occasions. He also features in the scene with quite possibly the most awkward walking animation I have ever seen. All this because it turns out Nova is the 4-star dragon, the one Dragon Ball cherished by Goku and his grandpa Gohan. So I actually kind of love the fact that he's much more well-tempered and eager to fight, carrying a lot of the same mannerisms that Goku has. So much so that by the end of the episode, they stop playing games and finally take their fight seriously, unleashing their full powers and setting up for their real fight to begin. But before we get to that, GT decides to take a bit of a detour. A detour to what I believe is the most damning episode of the series. Episode 55 is when I realized just how much of a disappointment GT truly is. And it's probably not even for the reason that you expect. This episode is all about Vegeta, all about his past and how he got to where he is now, giving us a flashback to all that time ago when he and Goku fought for the first time on Earth, giving each other their all in a battle for the fate of the planet. And despite being the stronger of the two, the higher class still lost to the low-class warrior. He would then look at the point where he placed his pride in that same man to defeat the one who took out the race of people he was set to lead. And lastly, looking back at the time when he would allow evil to pour back into his heart to forget the weakness living on Earth had brought him. Or so he thought. All these moments reflect him constantly falling behind his rival and realizing that he needs to find his strength again. So we watched a DBZ best of reel for 20 minutes. Now, I know that a lot of you would expect me to say that the problem with an episode like this is that it's lazy and a shallow attempt at nostalgia, which, I mean, it is, but that's not the central problem here. The reason why I call it the most damning episode of GT is that, despite it being pretty much all flashbacks, I welcomed it. This was easily the most natural emotion I felt through the series, and the most immersed I felt with any episode. And that was all given by something that this story didn't make. All this episode accomplished was reprising my love for Z, which has those incredible moments that left me spellbound with its unforgettable characters and stories. And whenever that flashback would end and we'd go back to GT, it felt like all I was looking at was an empty shell of what that series used to be. Something that it honestly seemed like it could never achieve. Aside from that, I also remember this being the episode where they briefly mentioned the concept of Super Saiyan 5 and implemented the idea of that transformation into the minds of countless different fans. So this episode is essentially the perfect storm for fans who want to make their own series, where they could retain the feeling of Z, repress the feelings of GT, and capitalize on that Super Saiyan 5 transformation. I've already covered the saga of Dragon Ball AF in another video I made a little while back. I'd highly recommend checking it out if you're at all interested in it and its backstory. It's one of my favorite videos I've made, and I'd love for it to get more attention. We then pick up right where we left off with Goku and Nova. And overall, their fight is aight. Nova is full of cool attacks and maneuvers that make him feel like a viable threat. I also like that Goku has him beat at one point and lets him go for sparing Pan earlier. The sportsmanship on display in this deathmatch is actually pretty refreshing to see. That said, that's when Ice Shinron, Nova's brother, is introduced. And where Nova Shinron is the baby face here, Ice Shinron is the chicken shit heel. And for those of you who don't speak wrestling, first of all, sorry. And second, Ice is the kind of dragon to use any kind of underhanded tactic he can to try and beat Goku. And the dynamic between the two brothers has something interesting to it, even if it is small. The big moment is when Ice is just about to be defeated and pretends to surrender, only to blind Goku and leave him seemingly defenseless. However, it does not work in his favor, with Goku saying that he can sense his cowardly ki from a mile away, and defeats him with a really sick looking dragon fist that encompasses the entire city as it comes crashing down onto Ice. And I think it's funny, after Nova has just witnessed his brother being viciously mauled by Goku, his first response is to be like, well, he had it coming. Here's something for your eyes, champ. But just before he can help, he is shot down by the last remaining dragon. The one whose power triumphs over them all. Sin Shinron, the one-star dragon, finally appears. and he's okay. I remember him being this be-all, end-all villain that truly felt like the ultimate being. The final boss to end all final bosses. And I mean, he is, but, well, how do I put this? He's boring. Sin Shinron is one of those Dragon Ball antagonists that feels like a wall to overcome. The last hurdle before the finish line. And the problem with hurdles like him is that they tend to be pretty lacking in personality or character. The only thing that he has to him is that he's evil and powerful. I'll give him points on the design though. It's super memorable and hits this perfect balance of sleek yet detailed. Everything else though, not the best. We get this one episode where it feels like it's just Goku hiding from Sin in an amusement park, which, after the Nova stuff, just feels monotonous. We get another moment where Goku has to reach full power again by using the power of the other Saiyan warriors, which would be fine if it wasn't for the fact that we'd already seen this exact scene in the Baby arc. Also, Oob gets jobbed out again. Then Toei decides to fake out his death like 3 different times, and it just kind of gets annoying after a while. Also, Sin's power up by absorbing the other Dragon Balls and becoming Omega Shenron feels like nothing. But there is definitely some good here too. Namely, Goku drilling Omega with another Dragon Fist is a cool visual. Vegeta becoming Super Saiyan 4 felt really nice to see, especially after how he'd been portrayed up to that point. And I don't think there's even anything I really need to say about Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta showing up. Doesn't matter where he is, it's literal goosebumps every time he's on screen. However, Gogeta doesn't get the job done in time, thanks to him goofing off and humiliating Omega instead of killing him. Looks like Gogeta has his own baby moment when he hits him with the Big Bang Kamehameha and doesn't beat him. So he's like, ah dang, this next one ought to do the trick, right before defusing and having to go back to fighting him 2-on-1. And aside from the appearance of a fan favorite, the only other thing that gets accomplished here is Omega no longer having the 4-star ball. A ball that Goku decides to swallow before promptly choking to death. And what follows after that is quite possibly the most uninspired episode of GT. This whole episode is just Goku and Vegeta trying to fuse again and Omega stopping them before they can. Simply put, the fight hardly feels worthy of being called that, and the already monotonous nature of this final stretch of the show only feels even more dragged out and repetitive. For a show that isn't based on a manga, it's impressive that they somehow managed to make filler content. And that's probably the most insulting part of this episode. The next episode has some merit, with Nova showing back up and almost taking out Omega all by himself. That is, until Omega takes over his body by blasting the Dragon Balls into him because, conveniently, he can do that. You'd think that would mean that Nova has all the power of the Dragon Balls instead, but no. God forbid we get an actually interesting character in Nova to be our final villain when he's a lot more engaging and makes more thematic sense, but whatever. Man, we've even got Omega calling himself a god of destruction, and alongside Babytron over there, that feels massively disrespectful towards Beerus. But we finally get to the climax of the fight when both Goku and Vegeta run out of energy and take an absolute beating from Omega. With that Dragon Thunder moment on Vegeta in particular being one of the most metal things I've seen out of Dragon Ball in a minute. And it seems like all has been lost, with Vegeta telling Gohan, Goten, and Trunks to get out of there to live another day so that they can avenge him and Goku. That feels like a powerful moment, and I like it a lot. But then Goku finally ends the battle after a universal Genki Dama, completely taking out Omega after this long battle. This cements the meh feeling I had for this arc, considering we had just seen a similar ending in the Buu arc, not to mention not being done nearly as well. Still, it's decent stuff. And that's when we actually get to my favorite part of GT. And that's the ending. I know that sounds like a joke, but I'm being serious. Hold on. I might wager to say that the end of GT is possibly the best ending any Dragon Ball series has ever had. Seeing Shenron reappear with a decision to leave the Earth so that people can no longer depend on the Dragon Balls and instead fix things of their own accord actually feels like such a great way to close things off. But then, Shenron also tells Goku that it's time. And so, he ventures off with Shenron, saying goodbye to those he's come to know throughout the years. Vegeta, Bulma, Master Roshi, Krillin, and Piccolo all see him for the last time as he is swept away with the Dragon Balls, becoming a part of him. The only thing left of him is the clothes he left behind, with Pan picking them up, Vegeta telling her to treasure them in his memory. We then flash forward 100 years later to the Budokai Tenkaichi. Everyone from the adventures we had come to know has long passed, except for one, Pan. She sits there watching her grandson, Goku Jr., wearing the same gi as his ancestor in the tournament finals against his destined rival, Vegeta Jr. As Pan watches on, she sees a familiar face in the crowd, one that she rushes toward to see, but misses the chance to meet again. And we then cut to Goku, who takes off in his Nimbus with a farewell. For all the crap I've given to GT, this genuinely felt impactful, emotional, and poetic. It's genuinely hard for me to try and come up with a more fitting ending to the series, and to that end, I've got to say it's one worth praising and cherishing. And that's it. After so many wrongs and frustrations, GT has finally concluded and left off on a high note that no other series in the franchise can compete with. And there's nothing else to take away from that beautifully constructed moment the final episode had to offer. Right? Right? Oh God! Oh God, no! Just when you thought the nightmare was over, there is still one more part to uncover. The Dragon Ball GT TV special, A Hero's Legacy. And honestly, jokes aside, I don't mind it too much. I know that there are a lot of people that really hate this one, but I really couldn't find it in me to dislike it. Its greatest sin is that it drags at some points, but the idea, not too bad. This entire special is pretty much just Goku Jr.'s backstory, showing how it is he got to be a Super Saiyan in that final match we saw at the end of GT. Here, Goku Jr. is a pretty weak kid who can't stand up to a group of kids who bully him, so he relies on his grandma Pan to help fend them off. But one day, as she explains the importance of finding his own strength, she collapses. Seemingly on death's door, Goku Jr. remembers a story she told him. A story about magical, wish-granting orbs known as Dragon Balls. And so, he sets off to Mount Paozu to find them and rescue his grandma. And surprisingly enough, the main bully, Puck, who is unworthy of that name, joins him on his adventure. And seeing this downscale journey after all the universal threats we had just finished seeing was pretty nice. It's primarily lighthearted fun, but always with a tinge of sadness just lurking in the background. The friendship and respect slowly made between Goku Jr. and Puck is a standout for me since it just felt so much more authentic compared to the other forced interactions GT made. And the Super Saiyan transformation felt like a decent payoff to this little arc we built, if a little unearned, since it feels like everybody and their mothers can become a Super Saiyan, unless your name is Pan. And seeing Goku talk to his several times great-grandson is actually a sweet moment. Especially when the follow-up scene gives us Puck and Pan alive and well, reuniting with Goku Jr. Oh yeah, Puck pretty much dies at one point. All in all, I walked into this special not expecting much. But ultimately, it was pretty sweet and touching, albeit unnecessary and too long for its own good. If anything, I'd say the place where it excelled most is having heart, which I have a hard time saying for the rest of the series. There's no way around this, right? Dragon Ball GT is an absolute mess. In the same interview mentioned before, when asked about the most important point about Dragon Ball GT, Kozo Morishita responded saying, "I thought that not going back was important." In other words, this viewpoint of not doing what was done in the past is characteristic of the Dragon Ball series as a whole. Although it would be easier and quicker to repeat what was done in the past, it is crucial to move forward, even if just by a single step. And to continue doing so, it wouldn't do to have Dragon Ball repeat the past. And I think he's right. It feels so important to Dragon Ball that its characters grow, that they strive for something beyond themselves, that they become better than they were the day before. And if this was the most important point about GT, then I think it's fair to say that they failed. From starting off with a vision that nobody was on board on, to sloppily returning back to the formula of the series prior, to them one of the worst arcs I've seen in anime, period, only to rapidly rush to the conclusion to put this series out of its misery. This show never felt like a step forward. In fact, it more often than not felt like a few steps back. The whole journey of GT felt incredibly aimless, and as a viewer, it was frustrating not knowing what to expect next. As I was watching GT, I couldn't help but feel like I was watching something that was purely being made to keep the series going. And the end result, from the animation and the writing to the characters and the story, feels like the product of burnout and stress. Just take into consideration the circumstances going on here. The series had already seen a decline with the Buu arc, and Akira Toriyama decided to step away from the franchise for a long time. So not only did GT not have the backbone of the manga to fall back on, but now the soul of the series that crafted the essence of these characters we had come to know and love was gone, leaving the heart it was trying to portray to come off as manufactured to the point of being insulting. So what was left felt like something wearing the skin of Dragon Ball, but without the spirit that the name carries. Gone is the passion, the emotion, the struggle to better oneself. And what lies in its place is the commoditization of Dragon Ball. Except for some incredible transformations and moments, there's no weight behind it. Most characters don't evolve beyond what they were by the end of Z, with Goku being at the forefront and getting some Vegeta by the end, but everybody else is just the backdrop. Just look at how Piccolo and Krillin are handled in Z versus GT, and you can really see what I mean. Not to mention characters like Oob, who was seemingly being built up as Goku's successor, becoming a nothing character that serves more times than not as a punching bag than anything else. Characters like Trunks and Giru are completely dropped off by the time the baby arc is concluded, with no real character arcs to speak of, and are just left in the dust. And then there's Pan, who got the worst of it by far. When she was first introduced, I didn't really care much for her. She came off as annoying and snarky in a way I didn't think worked. But then, she really started to grow on me as a character. Her ultimate goal is to prove her worth to everybody around her, to show that she's more than just some kid, to actively chase the strength to stand up for herself and be her own person. She could have very easily been the heart of GT, and all that struggle ultimately amounts to nothing. Morishita would state that the idea for Pan's role in the series was to cause an issue in an episode and for Goku to come and save the day. I can't begin to state how much of a disappointment that is. To have a conclusion to her arc where she transforms into a Super Saiyan for the first time when all hope is lost and she's the only one standing, proving her value once and for all, would have been such a great moment. But sadly, it'd be a moment we never get. And all these decisions would lead the series, for one reason or another, to be cancelled only a year after it began airing, leaving Dragon Ball to be dropped until Super would come around several years later. For me, the story of GT is a very disappointing one. One full of missteps, missed opportunities, and the feeling of turning something I love into something it hardly resembles anymore. But that's only my opinion. A little while back, I put up a poll asking people what they thought about GT, with the majority saying that, despite its faults, they still enjoyed it. And to those people, I've got to say that I hope my stupid little review on this series doesn't take away that spark for you or diminish your opinion on it. Because, at the end of the day, I can definitely see why there are people who like this show. If there's one thing I respect about it a ton, it's that I love the ideas it has, not you, and are some of the most creative things we've seen in Dragon Ball as a whole. My only wish is that it had some more time in the oven to really hone in that spirit I felt it was lacking. So I can't find it in me to be able to recommend Dragon Ball GT. But what I can say is that I have a newly found respect for it. It decided to play things really risky, and while not paying off, I always try to applaud stories stepping out of their comfort zones and trying something different. And you know what? Even though it's not always there, every once in a while, you'll come across that Dragon Ball magic that reminds you why you started watching in the first place. Whatever you feel about GT, there's some merit to it. And I don't know. I just can't find it within me to say that I hate it like I had so easily before. So I hope we can continue to use GT as a means to make the better stories that Dragon Ball deserves and carry on the legacy of one of the best franchises ever made. Just kidding, they didn't learn anything. Hello everybody, it's me again, hi. I just wanted to stop by to thank you for watching this video. Every summer or so I've been trying to post these big long scale videos, and I've had this one in the back of my mind for a while now. I think since I made that Dragon Ball Super Broly video, so it's been in the works for a while now, and I finally got this one out, so I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it was actually worth watching. I don't know, let me know I guess. But seriously, more than anything, I wanted to get on here and thank you all for just watching these videos and supporting me for the last year or so. The amount of support that's been coming through recently has been tremendous, and I really can't thank you all enough for just how much you've been showing me with the Gamera video, the Chainsaw Man video. It's all been fantastic. I hope this video does well as well. But seriously, thank you all so much. I really can't understand how you all would want to watch me, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Thank you. Thank you so much. Another thing I wanted to bring up while I'm on here, right? As of late, you might have noticed my uploading's been a little bit slower. There's a reason for that, and it's not just because I'm working on stuff in the background. I'm also working on some different stuff too. Lately, I've been working on some voice acting projects I've been trying to go through. Pretty new to it. I don't know. I guess, you know, it's cool, I guess. So I want to give a quick shout out to my latest project, as of recording this anyway. My latest project, which is gonna be the Naruto Abridged series I've been doing. Really great team, really great voice actors. If you have any interest in Naruto or voice acting or anything like that, I highly recommend you check out the series because we've been doing a lot of fun stuff with it, and I think it's only gonna go up from here.
Maybe I'll just call you Waterwing Zabuza.
That's not funny.
Zazu.
No.
Big Daddy Z.
You won't be making jokes when I'm done with you.
Thirdly, you know it's shill time, baby. As always, if you are either a channel member or a patron, you could have watched this video early, as well as other videos earlier, and some extra specials every once in a while. For about $1 a month, I think. I think that's what I have it set up as right now. Hopefully, maybe. I think I might not be lying. I don't know. We'll find out. So please consider joining the club. You know, be cool and help me support. Help support me making this into a job I can do, because that'd be cool, I guess. I'm really just doing great at this, aren't I? Also, if you have any interest, I've been uploading a ton on the second channel with some different stuff, like some Dragon Ball tier lists, Dragon Ball hot takes, that kind of thing, some fun stuff, just aside from like the big, huge videos like that. So if you're interested in checking any of that out, I'll leave a link here. Is okay? I think I got it. It's right there. It's right there, right? I'm still learning the YouTube thing on camera. This sucks. My God, I think that's correct. I don't know. Maybe. Hopefully. Let's see. And I think that's honestly all I got. But again, seriously, I really can't thank you all enough. It's been an incredible last year, and I hope to only grow from there. I already have some things planned out for the rest of the year. I think I already mentioned I have a Shin Godzilla video I'm slowly working on in the background. Whoopsies. I think I already mentioned I have a Shin Godzilla video I'm working on in the background, which I know a lot of you have been waiting for. Some other stuff. For those of you that have been sticking around, you know, over here to the very long end of this video, you know, maybe expect something special soon. Like, I don't know. How about like a Berserk video at some point, eh? I say that now, I'll probably not do it for like another year or two, which honestly is kind of needed. There's some stuff in the pipeline. I've got a bunch of different things I'm working through, seeing which one seems the most interesting to me and then to you guys. Yeah, that's all I got. So once more, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening to me going through all this crap. I really can't understate how much I appreciate it. I've said that so many times, but I really need to just express how much. Thank you. But that's all I got. I'll see you all later. Bye.